You know, the video we did on Denzel Washington's positive attitude about America is now approaching 2.5 million views, but this gentleman was not happy. Rubbish. Black people live in underfunded neighborhoods and schools that are underfunded. Then you ask them to compete with better educated kids. These black conservatives never criticize white conservatives, their master. He, I'm assuming he's referring to me, he has only strength for black people. He is just a paid mouthpiece for whites who surrounds himself with white women as usual, end of quote. Goodness, another satisfied customer. I guess I'm not in the will. Let's start with his last comment first. Surrounds himself with white women. What is the relevance of my personal life to my views? But let's play that game. Surrounds himself with white women as usual, meaning conservatives surround themselves with white women and liberals don't? Tell that to Van Jones. He's now divorced, but what about Don Lemon? No, he wasn't married to a white woman. He's married to a white man.
Hey, we're going to take a hot second to congratulate our friend Don Lemon, who just got engaged to his longtime boyfriend, Tim Malone. Woo!
Congrats.
Very handsome couple.
They're both, as far as I know, hard lefties, so underfunded neighborhoods. I have no idea what that even means. Are you saying that taxpayers should give poor neighborhoods more money because they're black? What are you saying? The gentleman also said underfunded schools. It's not true.
In order to get the true cost of an education, you need to add in all the expenses school districts typically leave out.
Houston School District offers a pretty straightforward example of how districts obscure school spending from parents and taxpayers.
Houston's stated per pupil spending comes from the general fund alone. That excludes 16 other education funds, from debt service payments and capital expenses to health insurance and athletics. When we add that spending back in, per pupil spending is $12,500. That's 50% more than the district claims. We've also looked at the District of Columbia, where spending is anything but straightforward. DC doesn't even publish a per pupil spending figure. It took dozens of phone calls and emails over the course of a month to get an official figure. They say they spend about $17,500. All capital expenditures are excluded from that figure, as if children don't need classrooms and buildings to learn it. When you add that, along with all the other education items, back into the budget, you get $28,000 per student.
There is no more prominent left-wing think tank than the Brookings Institution. And they looked at this and they were surprised. It turns out urban schools are better funded than suburban schools. Do school districts spend less money on poor and minority students? Quote, we find that on average, poor and minority students receive between 1% to 2% more resources than non-poor or white students in their districts, equivalent to about $65 per pupil, end of quote. As mentioned, Brookings was surprised. We hypothesized that wealthier districts would underallocate resources to poor and minority students. We reasoned that parents with greater resources could more effectively navigate the local political system, making it easier to secure a greater share of school spending for their children. Reasoning similarly, we also expected to find that in districts with greater income inequality and segregation, poor and minority students would receive a smaller share of school resources. In many cases, however, we find just the opposite. In richer districts, poor and Hispanic students receive more school resources relative to their non-poor and white peers in the same districts. Districts with more segregation, whether socioeconomic or racial, tend to spend more on poor and minority students relative to non-poor and white students, end of quote. These black conservatives, he said, never criticize their white conservative masters. Master? Slavery has been abolished since 1865, 13th Amendment, maybe you heard about it? So if a black person has a point of view who's conservative that you disagree with, He is therefore doing his master's bidding. Do liberals do the bidding of their masters, or do liberals not have masters? I'm confused. And here's another one I got from a gentleman who said, Larry, you keep saying there's no racism. At that point, it's difficult for me to finish reading the sentence because Larry has never said there's no racism. Here's what Larry has said. Back in 1997, what's that, 23 years ago, Time and CNN did a massive survey of black teens and white teens. And they asked them whether racism was a major problem in America. Not too surprisingly, both black teens and white teens said yes. But then they asked the black teens the following questions. Is racism a big problem, a small problem, or no problem in your own daily life? 89% said racism was a small problem or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, more black teens than white teens said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism, end of quote. That was 23 years ago, before the election and re-election of Barack Obama. Larry, who was your favorite baseball player growing up? Somebody asked me. That's simple, Sandy Kofax.
He found an empty seat behind home plate and began to roll. For decades, the film sat forgotten in a closet, now recently uncovered and restored. A glimpse of Sandy Kofax on a night that maybe God himself created especially for his own left arm. Batter after batter, Kofax was pitching with mastery, precision, concentration, and a fastball that split the night. With his handheld camera, the Dodgers trainer was capturing history, till there were 2 out in the third, and Bill Bueller ran out of film.
Sandy Kofax was amazing, had a period of maybe 5-6 years that were better than any pitcher, I think, in Major League history. And my first thing I ever wrote was a poem about Sandy Kofax. It got published in our little publication we had in the 7th grade. Fast forward several years later, I meet Sandy Kofax at a black tie affair in Beverly Hills. And I was with a publicist who knows everybody. And I said, is there any way you can get me to just introduce me to Sandy Kofax? Is that possible? He said, I'll find out. He goes away, comes back a few minutes later, comes back, says, follow me. We walk down to the front table where Sandy Kofax was. Kofax stands up to greet me. And I said, Sandy, I've always been an admirer of yours. I mean, I was so nervous. And I said, the first thing I ever wrote was about you. He said, really? I said, yeah, I wrote a poem about you. Let me just give you the first stanza. Kofax is on the mound. The game has just begun. He gets a sign from the catcher and swish, strike one. Sandy Kofax put his arm on my shoulder and said, don't quit your day job. A few months ago, I got a letter from somebody I had completely forgotten about. Years ago, when I lived in Cleveland, a friend of mine has a sailboat, and he invited a couple of people to come on the sailboat. So we're all sailing on Lake Erie. And this guy happened to be white. He's about 35 years old, was complaining about his job. Hated his job, hated his boss. And I listened, and I said, what are you going to do about it? And he said, what do you mean? I said, are you going to sit here and just moan and whine about your job the rest of your life? Or are you going to do something about it? And that was about it. And I completely forgot about it. I get this letter a few months ago. Dear Larry, don't know if you remember me, but years ago when you lived in Cleveland, we were on a sailboat, and he recounts the story. And he told me that he started his own business. He now has 20 people who work for him. He's now extremely successful, and he thanked me for giving him the prod that he needed in order for him to get off the couch and stop whining and do something about his life. But as I said, he was white. Everybody needs a boost. Everybody needs encouragement. Everybody needs support. Nothing to do with race. This is the greatest country God ever created. You can go from nothing to something faster in America than any other country in all of human civilization. Let's take advantage of it, okay? Guess what just happened? We've been demonetized by YouTube. That's right, Epic Times channels have been demonetized. But I've got some exciting news. It means we must be doing something right. Frankly, I'm amazed it took them so long. Here's what I want you to do. If you want to keep supporting us, just go to LarryTube.com. If you want to hear me uncensored and on demand, LarryTube.com. That's all, because we've got a country to save. I'll see you next time. YouTube, what took so long?